All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Eugene Public Library. My name is Adrian. I'm a librarian here. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Ken Babbs, our author for the day. Ken was one of the co-founders of the Merry Pranksters, and he remains a 60s cultural icon. He has finally published his memoir, which has been published by Tsunami Books right here from Eugene. So today Ken is going to talk about his memoir. After the talk, you'll be able to purchase the books right over there from Tsunami. So without further ado, please welcome Ken Babbs.
Yeah.
Thank you. You have to look at me. Well, of course, it's a distinct pleasure to be here at the library, one of my favorite places in Eugene. My mother was a librarian, so I know all about libraries. She was not only a librarian, but she was the librarian at school. In the grade school and the junior high and the high school, they moved her up every time I was in there, because whenever I got in trouble, they didn't send me to the office, they sent me to the library. Much worse. Mom caught on the flack. I don't know what to say about an intro. Oh, I guess it is about the book. It came about because my wife Eileen taught English at South Eugene High School for 19 years. And her American literature class, they read sometimes, no, the other one. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And then in AP English, they read Sometimes a Great Notion. And she had me come in and talk to every one of her classes. And so before I'd go in, I'd make a few notes, kind of give me some ideas what to talk about and everything. Did that for 19 years. And then I don't know what year it was, must have been a year or so ago. I was looking at those notes and thought, hey, this would make a book. And so I started out on writing it. And I didn't want it to be a memoir or an autobiography or fiction. I didn't know what to call it. And I ran across this book that's called Knickerbocker's History of New York City, written in the late 1700s. And it was burlesque. It was called a burlesque. And it was full of things like, why is the mayor of New York City meeting all the boats coming in and taking the best looking women and giving them jobs in City Hall? And so there were other stuff like in there caused the sensation, and everybody was up in arms. Who is this Knickerbocker and why is he saying these things? And finally it was revealed. The real author was Washington Irving, the most popular, best known author in America at the time. And an aside there about Washington Irving, he's the first American author ever to make his living by writing. Few and far between. Well, I guess it's been a while. So anyway, I thought, oh, that's perfect, a burlesque. So this is not a memoir, nor any other stuff. The burlesque and the definition of it is it's an historical occurrence enhanced with embellishments, inventions, and I guess you could say lies. And I thought that's perfect, because when I started writing these stories, I would know what I was doing and what the story was and make a real story out of it. But there was a lot of things I made up as embellishments to keep it real, you know what I mean? And as a real psychedelic book. Well, anyway, it is, you know, if you've seen it, 70 different stories, each one self-contained itself with the beginning and middle and ending. And like Kesey says, we don't need facts, we need stories. Stories are what link us together through time and into the future and right now. So this is what I wanted it to be, a book of stories, and it is. So we'll go into them. Kesey and I met in 1958 at Stanford in the graduate writing program. And the class was a tremendous class of luminaries of writing, and we all got along real well and became friends. And one of our best friends for Kesey and me was Wendell Berry. And so we've known him for a long time. I still know him and talk to him all the time. And so I'll start with this one. Wendell, he wrote a book. He's a poet, and among other things. And he, where's the poem? Oh, I'm on the wrong chapter. Okay, we'll get it. We'll get it. This is the way life is today, you know, in the COVID. You don't know what you're doing. I'll tell you one thing I won't do, though. I'm going to raise this up a little bit so I can really shout into it. Maybe I won't. Yeah, that's better. Oh, yeah, huh? Oh. I'm going to make a spectacle out of myself. I guess that works. So he wrote one book of poetry called The Mad Farmer Liberation Front. This is pretty good. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay, want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Or with your love to the fields, lie easy in the shade? Rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. Not bad. We're going to take you to the airport by canoe, Kesey said. Wendell Berry laughed. Our old pal from the Stanford writing class, now a renowned essayist, poet, novelist, and farmer, he used horses instead of a tractor and didn't have a TV. People came to his house to check out his composting toilet. A spokesman for sustainable farming, he had flown to Oregon to give a talk at the University of Oregon. Long, lanky, and laconic. You ask him a question, he pondered a bit, then answered in a slow, measured voice. He spent the night at Kesey's and gave his talk to a packed house the next evening. The next day, a clear, bright Sunday with nary a cloud in the sky, he was scheduled to fly back to his home in Kentucky. Kesey and I were going to take him to the airport. We put the canoe in the Willamette River under the Jasper Bridge. Kesey jumped in the water and wrapped his arms around a big salmon. The fish shrugged and sent Kesey splashing. I grabbed the salmon by the tail and it whipped me back and forth like a dog shaking a weasel. I fell in and watched the dark-skinned fish swim away. Wendell Berry laughed uproariously at Kesey and me floundering in the drink. I held the canoe steady. Kesey and Wendell loaded our drinks and food. Kesey sat in front with a paddle, Wendell in the middle, our passenger. Carrying my paddle, I pushed off and hopped in the back seat. We headed to the middle of the river and pointed the nose downstream. The Jasper Bridge disappeared behind us, and we were quickly removed from all traces of civilization. Big trees hung over the riverbank. A blue heron rose from the shallows and flew ahead before swerving like herons do, off into the cross. We could have been the first ones to traverse the river. Everything was the same as hundreds of years before. The river ran straight and true. We came to a sharp left turn, and I held the paddle hard on the side of the canoe to bring us around the curve. The water was racing, and we picked up speed and swept in close to the bank. There was a rock-covered flat spot, and we pulled over to take a break. I went off a ways to take a leak and heard Kesey telling Wendell, "That curve was where one time Babbs held his paddle on the wrong side of the canoe, and in the frenzy to straighten out, we tipped over and everybody went in the drink. We popped to the surface, grabbed hold of the canoe, and splashed to this very spot where Babbs, stripped to his underwear, was taking a piss, just like he is now." "Yeah," I yelled over my shoulder. "And you announced to everyone, 'Look at Babbs searching in his shorts for his dick, all shriveled up from being in the cold water.'" You're supposed to laugh at that. Well, Wendell laughed. He said, "A shriveled dick is probably better than no dick at all." "Well, unless it's Dick Tracy you call to find the remains," I said. This is literature, right? Highbrow. As fitting, being in a library full of nothing but highbrow books. We pushed off into the river. Rocks jutted from both sides. Water splashed over the front. We sliced through the channel and came out of the trough, heading straight for a big oak tree that had toppled into the river, branches thick above and below the surface. We stirred right to keep from being dragged under, and after we were clear, Kesey said, "One time we were coming down the river with George Walker, and we got caught in the branches of a tree like that, and we all went in. Babbs and I got out from the entanglement, caught up with the canoe, and while hanging onto the sides, looking around, realized George was nowhere in sight. Just as we were about to dive under and look for him, he popped up downriver from us. A real relief." "It's a wonder," Wendell said. "Nothing like that on our slow-moving river back home." "How about the time," I said, "when under one of those trees we saw a canoe turn over, all snarled up, and we pulled over to take a look. Half scared we'd find someone in there. We hooked a line to the canoe and pulled it out, and luckily, no bodies, no life jackets, no paddles, no nothing. We towed it home, and Kesey's brother Chuck welded the tear in the canoe, and we've been using it ever since." "This canoe," Wendell asked. "No, our spare," Kesey said, "for when we have more people making the run." Wendell was quiet, enjoying the ride and watching the changing scenery. The osprey that had been circling overhead hit the water with a big splash. Wings beating frantically, it rose with a salmon clutched in its talons. It skimmed along the river, then flew up and landed in the top of a dead tree. "I believe that's a yew tree behind that snag," Wendell said. "It is indeed," Kesey said. "Grows for 100 years or so and doesn't get very big. It's valued now for its bark, which contains Taxol, a cancer fighter." "Well, that could well be the reason the bark is poison to cattle who eat it," Wendell said. "In England, they planted yew trees in churchyards so the cattle couldn't get at the church." Keep them out. You can imagine a cow coming in right in the middle. "Moo! I hate this sermon. Moo!" We came along a round curve, and in a straightaway ahead, people floated in inner tubes and plastic rafts. Others were splashing in the shallows. The sandy bank was a turmoil of kids and teenagers running and skipping stones, standing and talking and drinking beer. Clearwater boat landing. You people ever been there? They're really in Springfield, really a neat place. Sometimes we pull the canoe out here, but today we're going on. But we have to stick close to the shore because over there in the middle of the river is a whirlpool. You don't want to get caught in that. It doesn't pull you down into a deep spiral, but keeps you going round and round in a circle. And it's a devil of a time getting out. Clear of the people, we disappeared into a tunnel of trees hanging over the water. Once again, seemingly far apart from civilization and its teeming masses. For a while, Kesey said, I had an aluminum rowboat we took down the river. It seated 4. We used that boat a lot. One time we had a tank of nitrous oxide with us. A little bit high, we smashed the boat into a rock early in the trip and it gashed a big hole in the bottom. We couldn't keep up with the bailing, so pulled over, tipped the water out and duct taped the butt of the hole as best we could. Then kept going until the leak got too big and the distance between stops too smaller and smaller. And then at dark, we decided to spend the night on the river. We built a fire on the riverbank, cooked a fish David Bukovich caught, but he didn't stay to eat it. Instead, he went crashing through the blackberries to find a phone and call his wife and let her know we were okay, and for her to call the other wives. The next morning, when it was light enough to see, right there was the Jasper Bridge, our destination. We got on the boat, bailed as hard as we could, and we went ashore. That boat was never launched again. Uh-oh, Kesey said, decision time. Up ahead, the river separated around a small island. Which way, Kesey said. I couldn't remember for sure. I was leaning to the left, so I said the left channel. When we got alongside of the island, the canoe grounded on a shallow rock bed. We laid the paddles in the belly and pulled the canoe along, scraping the bottom until the river joined together and we hit deep water. We clambered in and took up our paddles. I said, reminds me of the woman riding her bike over the cobblestone street. She said, I'll never come this way again. Kesey dug his paddle in the water and flipped a geyser into my face. Okay, I'll never tell that stupid joke again, I said. We rounded the last bend for the straightaway to our destination. On our left, the railroad line to Roseburg. On the hill above the railroad, Interstate 5. On our right, the riverbank lined with mobile homes. We passed under the Springfield Bridge, angled the canoe towards shore, and pulled up on the dry land. We were in Day Island Park, green grass and bushes and paths, and a short walk to city streets. We hiked 2 blocks to the Springfield Creamery, owned and operated by Kesey's brother Chuck and Chuck's wife Sue. Their health food and pool store was next to the creamery. Inside the store, Chuck had built a platform 7 feet off the floor with steps leading up, railings all around, and a regulation pool table in the middle. Out on the sidewalk, an 8-foot-long box sat against the building between the creamery and the health food and pool store, the free box. This is where, when we're soaking wet from a canoe trip, we get dry clothes, Kesey said. The free box was overflowing with pants and shirts and jackets and hats, all donated. Put something in, take something out. Wendell liked that. Could use one of those boxes in most every town, he said. Chuck came out of the creamery, and he and Kesey and I walked back to the river to get the canoe. We loaded the canoe on the top of Chuck's pickup. Faye took Wendell to the airport in the car, and Kesey and Chuck and I drove to the Jasper Bridge where we first set in. We transferred the canoe to the top of my truck. Chuck drove away and Kesey and I hopped into my truck. What do you say we go over to the Jasper store and get a beer, I said. Maybe even 2, Kesey answered. I parked in front of the store next to another pickup. We looked in the back of the truck. A 7-foot-long sturgeon lay in the truck. It was still breathing. They can live quite a while out of water, Kesey said. Looks like he's about at the end of the line, I said. We still have time. Grab the other end. Kesey reached in and got his arm under the head. I picked up the tail. We lifted the fish over the side of the truck and stumbled across the river, down the hill to the river, and pitched the fish in. It lay motionless, gills slowly opening and closing. Then with a flick of its tail, glided away. Let's get out of here, Kesey said. We hustled to my truck. I spun the tires. Phew, I said, breathing hard. Lucked out there. Yeah, Kesey said. Too bad someone with a camera wasn't there to catch the look on that guy's face when he saw his sturgeon was gone. Gone, real gone, I said, just like that beer we didn't get. That's a good one. Wendell Berry. Okay, this is another one you like, about another great character that we knew and ran into, did a lot of stuff with. It's called Singing Waiters in a Dead Rat Cafe. Am I keeping close enough to the mic you can all hear? Okay. Okay, good. I'll tell you something first, is back in the 70s, Kesey and I put out a series of magazines called Spit in the Ocean, small literary magazines, each one with a different editor. So that now we're leading into a story about one of them. We were feeling good. I'm gonna have a drink.
You want some water?
No, I got better than water. I got cranberry juice. Just squeezed this morning. And it takes a lot of them cranberries to make a thing of juice, you know. We were feeling good. We had just knocked out the second issue of Spit in the Ocean, and we're downing hill and hill in beakers of ice and water. I tipped my glass. Well, Chief, we're ready for the lead into the next edition. What will we do to titillate the reader's interest? The Chief furrowed his shaggy John L. Lewis eyebrows and peered over to the top of the specs he wore on the job, but pretended he didn't need, even when he was giving a talk somewhere. He'd squint at the wriggly lines in the paper like a mole blinded by the sun. Well, since I was the editor of the first issue and you the second, he told me, I'm considering using a guest editor this time. That drew Kathy, our lightning-fingered Girl Friday Earth goddess, dark-dressed mistress of the keys and silk-sweet telephone voice, upright in her chair. A slightly drunken trill in her voice, she asked, someone else? It's all I can do to hold this floundering enterprise together working with you two nuts. And now you want to bring in someone else? She pursed her lips. I asked the Chief, who do you have in mind? Tennessee Leary. What? My eyes locked with Kathy's. A fleck of worry sparkled in her blue irises. I smiled reassuringly. Admirable choice, I said. 5 o'clock alarm reveille woke me from my dream. Tennessee Larry, where'd the Chief come up with that one? Outside, the crescent waning moon surrendered illumination rights to the beaming sun. The solid breakfast of eggs, toast, and coffee, and I was ready to rumble. I fired up the old pickup and headed for Kesey. When he got ready, I finished working on his new toilet. I bolted it to the floor, hooked up the water, and gave it a flush. We were good to go. So was Kesey. He threw our bags in the back seat of his black 66 Mercury convertible and top down drove south on I-5. Our destination, the federal prison in San Diego where Tennessee Larry was incarcerated. No clock in the car, no sense of time on the winding forested road to Coos Bay. Then the cold ocean air, heater on full blast, a long haul to the redwoods in California where a giant statue of Paul Bunyan's amplified voice berated the gawking tourists. If you don't take the walk through the Treason Mystery, you won't see Babe the Blue Ox pulling a log big as a freight train. Kesey sang in response, look at you, a real He-Man, not a ratchety flim-flam geek, but an honest-to-God woodsman. On to Bodega Bay, where we stopped to buy oysters. I stopped to open one with my knife. Kesey shook his head. Watch it. Remember what happened the last time you did that in Portland? Yeah, the knife stabbed me in the hand. I thought wrapping the napkin around the cut until the bleeding stopped would be the end of it. Until your hand swelled up like a Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade balloon. I washed it out with cold water and that did the trick. So, Kesey said, the moral of the story is, don't do it again. And I opened the oysters with nary a scratch to my hand. Afterwards, we swam in another ocean, camped on the beach, rose in the morning, peed in the bushes, hit the road for San Francisco, singing as we crossed the Golden Gate Bridge. Open up your golden thighs, California, here we come. Down the Bayshore Freeway to Bryant Street in Palo Alto, where Ed McClanahan lived. No one home, so we went inside, mixed orange juice and vodka and sat on the porch. Ed arrived with Jane Burton in tow. Since we'd finished off the vodka, Ed coughed up enough dough for Kesey and Jane to drive to Whiskey Gulch to buy beer. There was money left over, so they stopped at the store for hamburger and potatoes to cook for supper. After we ate, we hit Ed up for some more cash, telling him we were down to our last few dollars. I bought the grub, Ed said. That'll cover my share of the dilly-dallying you're up to. I owe Faye $20, Jane Burton said. I'll give you that. Saved again. Thank you, Lord, Kesey said. We rolled a couple of joints from Ed's stash and horn blaring, burned rubber around the block to the freeway. Then south for an all-night run, taking turns, sleeping and driving, cassette player on low volume. We arrived in LA at dawn and woke up our old movie-making pal, Redhead Bobby, long locks to his shoulders. His living room held a color TV, a phone, and an electric pencil sharpener. But the kitchen had the requisite coffee maker, so Bobby fired it up and we swilled coffee. And then the three of us jumped into the convertible, and with Bobby at the wheel, Kesey threw the I-chain. Spying about with sharp eyes like a tiger with insatiable craving. Awareness of danger brings good fortune. Thus in fear and trembling, the superior man sets his life in order and examines himself. That pretty much covers it, Kesey said. Now let's execute it. Check that out, Bobby said, motioning behind us. A brown Lincoln Continental with a scraped side and a flopping wheel was chasing a Ford pickup with a crushed fender. Whoo-wee, I said. Keep your eyes on the road. I'll fill you in. The guy in the Continental is intent. So what if he crashes in the attempt? Wife's hassling, daughter's got a rash on her face, and his son's in jail. Revenge is mine, he thinks. I'll crush that Ford for side swiping me. I'll crush that Ford for side swiping me. Bobby Ford and we left them smoking in the distance. Hey, there's the Nixon compound, Kesey said. A plain adobe house behind a chain link fence, an incinerator putting out black smoke. Still burning those tapes, I said. I wonder if he's involved with the Vietnamese refugee adoption policy. Wait a minute, that's 2 pages. Maybe it's a porno movie, Bobby said. Have mercy, Kesey said. More likely a family that would live in this place, do the cooking, cleaning, and yard work. In San Diego, we stopped at a bar for a beer and made a phone call to our contact, Mr. Hills, who told us we had to get over to the Fayetteville courthouse before it closed at 4. I'm clean, I said, checking my shirt pocket for roaches. We went up to room 201 and met Mr. Hills, who told us he used to be an agent in Grants Pass, Oregon, and his daughter went to the University of Oregon. He spoke English, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, and used them all, talking to people he met. We walked out of the building and crossed the street to the correction center. He introduced us to the warden, a squat, bespectacled man. He looked at the paperwork. One thing the warden told us, don't use his real name. Well, I didn't know that was in the story. I like that. Audience participation. One thing the warden said, don't use his real name. Here he's known as Bruno. The federal prison was a 15-story high-rise that from the outside looked like a hotel. Inside it was institutional. Bare concrete walls, steel desks and chairs, a metal detector, and a sign in front, caution, explosive devices will detonate when placed in the magnetic field. That's good to know. I took off my watch. A burly trustee wearing a blue jumpsuit came in and Hills talked to him in Spanish. A black woman working behind the counter gave the trustee a bad time, goofing and jiving, aware of Kesey and me watching, playing to an audience. Arrest them, said the trustee, pointing to us. Kidding. But who knows? This place paid for keeps. We had to wade through a prisoner count. Usually it's over by now, Hills told us. It has nothing to do with someone being missing, just that the numbers are straight. Attention institution, a voice announced over the loudspeaker. The count is correct. We stood waiting for Joanna, Bruno's wife, who was supposed to visit him with us. Want to go in without her, asked Hills. We agreed. He shook our hands and returned to his office. A guard looked through the stuff we brought, pages for the magazine and a cassette recorder. Just don't leave anything with him. We passed through a metal detector, then took an elevator to 4-7. We stepped into a foyer. On the left, a closed door, no window. On the right, with a big door with a big window. A TV camera surveyed the room. Damn, the guy on the door isn't here, said the guard escorting us. And the intercom is broken. Hey, he yelled at the half-closed door. Call 477 on your radio and tell Sid there's 2 here to visit Bruno. A guard carrying keys and a walkie-talkie appeared at the window on the other side of the door. What is this? He picked up his walkie-talkie. Desk. I thought you said Bruno's wife was here. There's 2 and neither one's his wife. What? She's coming up now? Okay, I'll let these 2 in. He pointed the walkie-talkie at the door. An electronic beam activated in central opened it, and he motioned us into a visiting room, carpeted, metal tables, plastic chairs. The guard led Joanna into the room at the same time Bruno came in through the other door. He pushed past the guard and embraced her. Then Bruno turned to greet Kesey. Joanna stepped forward, and we shook hands, and I gave her a slight kiss on the cheek. We separated, she to Kesey, Bruno to me. His brown hair was pulled back in a wave, exposing his high forehead. There was an Irish twinkle in his eye. Our code name for you has been Tennessee Larry, I told him. Like we're agents, clothed in mystery, intentions unknown. I hear you're Bruno now. Yes, I picked up the name from Giordano Bruno, an Italian philosopher in the late 1500s, but I shortened it to George Bruno because I was in a cell with some mafioso stoolies who might not have gone for me being Giordano, not from an Irishman. The priest said I used to wear robes. I never wore robes in my life. Like the priest, they tried to unfrock. They couldn't do that to me. I was never frocked. Singing waiters in a dead rat cafe is what they call this place. We sat down at the table. Bruno and Joanna pulled the chairs close together and sat with their arms in her lap. Bruno turned to Kesey. This is my 29th jail. 1 week before the filing deadline for the California gubernatorial race, I was slapped with 2 tenors, down with 2 dimes, running wild. The Weather Underground broke me out of jail. They cut the power during the movie, and I went up on the roof where one of their men on the inside had tied a rope across to a telephone pole out in the road. I had to lower myself down the rope, hand over hand, my ankles crossed over the rope. From there, they transferred me to Algeria and turned me over to the Black Panthers, who didn't trust me. And it was like jail all over again, until they got tired of me and let me go to Afghanistan, where I met Joanna. 2 American agents were also there. They arrested me and brought Joanna with me back to the States. People vaguely remember my face, he said. Are you a movie actor, they asked? Late 20th century, I told them. They all wanted you for something, being a guru or a fad, Kesey said. They wanted to know the answer, beside the turn on, tune in, drop out thing. I have come to a very simple solution. All the technology has to go underground. Metal belongs underground. You take a hatchet out in the forest and drop it. It goes exactly where the divine process wants it to be, underground. I foresee where the tribal groups that drop out will be helping to get back in harmony with the land, and we'll accomplish that by putting technology underground. Well, that should flummox the authorities, I said. Kesey grimaced. Oh, it's all earth shoes. You haven't gone for any of it. You stayed with an original vision and they resent that. We had a plan once for you to split. Bruno laughed. Yeah, let's do it, split. Yeah, first we'd go to Mexico, have you start all over again from the point where when you were busted. The years before, it happened when Bruno and his wife and children had been crossing into Texas from Mexico, and he had his 20-year-old daughter hide his pot in her underwear with me, and then they were caught. After Bruno and Joanna were brought back from Afghanistan, they were taken to San Francisco. The feds were convinced Bruno was connected with LSD labs, and 2 agents drove him around to suspected houses and asked him what he knew. They let Joanna ride along in the back seat. One morning, with him, they're both in the back seat. One morning, Joanna opened her purse and showed Bruno a gun. Bruno shook his head. Then he saw another pistol lying on the floor. He picked it up and held it over the shoulder of the driver. Here, I think this dropped out of your holster. Oh, shit. That's a beautiful scene to me. First, she wants to give him a gun so he can shoot his way out. And then he finds another one and gives it back to him. That's just in case you weren't paying attention when I was reading it. Where was I here? Oh, the feds, realizing Bruno wasn't involved in the drug lab thing, took him to San Diego, where he now awaited sentencing from that first arrest at the Mexican border. Your San Francisco lawyer, Michael Horowitz, wants me to come to the city for a press conference, Kesey said. Since you met with him 3 weeks ago, he's been subpoenaed by the San Francisco grand jury. I hate it when these pages stick together. Probably to announce he won't cooperate with the authorities in any way. In India today, Bruno said, the people who get the most respect are those who went to jail for their principles during the independence fight. I see the people here being put in jail for possession of marijuana as being in a very similar position. Probably 90% of the people in jail for pot belong to 3 groups. They're either minorities or young or creative. There are very few white middle-class Americans in jail for possession of marijuana. He shook his head. The seed-carrying soft body should not be embedded in steel. It does no one good. I had no intention of going to jail. I wasn't going to provide any kind of model for people to go to jail for spiritual purposes. And here I am, for a pot bust almost a decade ago. 2 tough-looking prisoners in sweat clothes came into the room. Bruno jumped up, went over and exchanged skin. The first prisoner, crew-cut, heavy, friendly. The other, a 2-day beard, silent, wearing dark glasses, both young in their 20s. These are my handball partners, Bruno said. His patsies, said the friendly one. You mean this elderly gentleman can lick you, I said. He cleans up the floor with us. We don't use the word lick to outsiders, the other prisoner said. The door was beamed open and he left. What did he mean by that, I asked. I don't know, said Bruno. Probably something to do with affairs below the belt, Kesey said. Before they kick us out, let's get down to the real reason Babbs and I are here, Kesey said. He took out the spit in the ocean material and spread the pages on the table. Bruno looked through them. Manuscripts sent in by scientists, swamis, spiritualists, spouses, space nuts, spelunkers, star builders, and other prognosticators of the future. They had written theories and stories about higher intelligence based on scientific discoveries in neurologics, genetics, astronomy, physics, including responses from occultists, psychics, and spiritualists. Kesey and I had one of the hundreds of responses down to 9. This is top drawer stuff, Bruno said, from relatively unknowns in the field. Very refreshing. I'm not interested in so-called experts like Skinner and Sagan. The hard part is over, said Kesey. You had something explaining what you were looking for. Write a few intros to the submissions and we'll do the rest. The door opened and trays of starchy food were wheeled in. Visiting hours were over. Kesey handed Bruno a sheet of paper, a sketch of the cover of Spit in the Ocean #3. A small square in the upper right corner showed a spaceship shooting off into the sky with a word balloon coming out of it. I'm getting out of here. Otis, the joker of the deck, was drawn in the middle of the page, his body rising from jail bars, hands clasped over his head, wrists manacled to stars, and below the picture, in large letters, the title, Communication with Higher Intelligence, edited by Dr. Tim Leary. I like it, Bruno said. I'm aboard for sure. It will be nice to use my real name again. Thank you. Well, Cronies is full of stories like that. There's 70 of them, each one a complete story in itself, from beginning to middle, late, and a little bit of action going on. I like doing it that way and not having it just run into a long-winded thing like most books are. And so, of course, you can get your copy over here if you want one. And now, if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer questions. Good, thank you. Go ahead.
How long did it take you to write book?
To write the book?
Yeah.
I don't know, you think a year, maybe a little over a year is all. Yeah, it went real fast once I started doing it. I'd get up every morning and write a story or two until I had it all together. And then it got really heavy editing, which was good. My wife Eileen was with me all the way editing it, and our daughter Elizabeth is also an English teacher. She helped. And then at Tsunami Books, Steve and Scott, they went over through it a whole bunch. And Kesey's editor, Ed David Stanford, he went through the whole thing from beginning to end. So it really got a lot of work on it. Yeah.
Is there a story about Paige Browning in there?
There's a terrific story about Paige Browning.
Is that in the book?
Yes, it's one of the best things. There's he's in there like for 2 or 3 stories. Really good stuff. Yeah, he was really a good kid. Paige Browning was a guy who showed up at Kesey's one time. He was an ex-Navy guy and then an ex-Marine guy. And he and I hit it off pretty good because we were both born in Columbus, Ohio, of all things. But he was never really in with the in crowd, always kind of on the fringe and wanted to get in, but he's kind of a doof for a while. But after a while, he became a really important guy in our gang and in our relationships. So he merited a good story in the book. Yeah.
So you worked over some audio tapes you had that you guys used to do a lot of taping and everything?
Yes, this is one of the things. If you heard him, he asked if I worked with audio tapes that I had in the book, and the answer is yes, because we filmed and shot movies with practically everything, and made tape recordings with practically everything we did, and so like on the bus trip we took in '64 to New York and back, taped and filmed the whole thing. And so the best thing that happened on the bus trip was Kesey getting Neal Cassady, the famous beat character, best friends with Jack Kerouac and Dean Moriarty in the book On the Road. He got Cassady, who was a well-known driver, that stole 500 cars, I think, before he was 15 years old. Got him to drive the bus. And so Neal is this talker, man. He tells stories just like crazy, unending, and there's all kinds of references to all kinds of stuff. But he's fantastic, and so we had a microphone hanging in front of him, and we in the bus we had speakers everywhere, on the inside and outside, and microphones everywhere, and so it all went out. It went into the tape recorder, but it also went out on the speakers out. We were in town and towns, and out to the people in the streets and all that. So when I wrote the book, I was able to get into the tapes of all this Cassie's rap and type them up and get his real thing, because there's no way in the world anybody, I don't care who they are, could do Cassady, on their own and try to be him and be like him. It's too unique. So it's really what is really good about the book. And then all through the book, there would be stories that had things happening that also I had recordings of. So I was always able to use the real dialogue. And when Kesey's doing talks, I was able to take his gems out of the long top and put them in the book.
We have a couple questions actually online. Oh, was there another one?
Okay. Did someone have one?
Scott says.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to tell people about the Wendell Berry story, because we were the so-called the publishers. We decided we were going to do it together, the three of us. And part of all the references to people is there. Hunter Thompson, music by the Grateful Dead, what this poem by Wendell Berry, which is one of the great poems that needed to be in the book. It's a very important poem, Mad Farmer Manifestos. You gotta get permission from these people. Ken was like, oh hell, they don't care, just put it in there. So, we'll see. So, Wendell were like, well, how do we get in touch? Well, you don't do a computer. Okay, well, I'll just talk to him on the phone. He said it's okay. We're like, well, it's okay that you talk to him on the phone, it's okay, but that might not hold up with his publisher. So Ken sent him a letter with a postcard included, and it said, I Wendell Berry agreed to let Ken publish the Mad Farmer Manifestos, a full-page poem, in the book. And Wendell Berry signed it. He would do that. He sent it back. We got it hanging on our screen and there at the bookstore. And then we were able to go to his publisher and say, look, Wendell said it's okay. Can we do it? So that's kind of the process. They're like, yeah.
That's right. So I should have mentioned this at the beginning, was when I finished this book, I had an agent in New York City for my first book, Who Shot the Water Buffalo, and she tried to sell this book to every publisher in the country, and they all turned it down. It was not like anything they'd seen before, and it was not in their heads of what sells. It didn't meet all the criteria they had for what a book should be. And so Scott, at Tsunami Books, he decided he wanted to be a press, Tsunami Press, and put out books, and he picked my book to be the first one. It was a wonderful thing. It really was. The team he has there at the bookstore and some other friends we have, all of us pitched in on it and really made it a nice book. And then the work sent the PDF to the printer, and we got to pick the paper and the font, and Scott got to give the orders of what the book would look like, the real book without the flap on there. I mean, it's highest quality you can get. So the whole thing, the whole package and the whole deal, it's really something. And I said to him, I says, this is perfect. And why? Because we can thumb our noses at New York City. Here in Eugene, we can put out a product better than anything they would ever do. And it's really a lesson to small towns, small bookstores, any kind of small industry that's out here that, yes, we don't need to lean on those people, to do it their way. We can do it.
Even Amazon now has it.
What?
Even Amazon is carrying your book.
They're sold out.
They probably can, yeah.
Oh, so one of the things of doing this is distribution. And one of the most important things about a book, what do you got it, how are you going to sell it? And so we were lucky to get to know this guy named Charlie Winton, who at one time ran Counterpoint Press, who, by the way, published Wendell Berry. And also he had a distribution company called Pacific Group West. And so he's since sold them, but in his retirement, he got to know us and everything, and his former assistant at PGW now runs the thing, and he got a hold of her. So PGW picked up the book. So the actual, even though Scott did a pre-order and could sell books, people calling in, and that was done in December, the actual release date, where the books will be on all the bookstores, just a few days ago, January 11th. So now people are emailing me all the time how I get this book or everything. I used to send them to Scott, but now I tell them go to their local bookstore, order it there, because we want these indie bookstores to keep flourishing.
I can read. There's a couple of questions that were in the chat that I can read if you
Sure.
want to answer. Okay. So, what is your favorite memory of Julius K., who recently passed? How does it feel to finally have Cronies out for everyone to enjoy? And any plans for a tour with George and farther?
She's talking about this man that we knew, Julius Cartman in San Francisco. Kind of a wild little guy. He wasn't really an agent. Yeah, I guess you could call him an agent. But anyway, when Janis Joplin was getting more and more popular, he took her on and became her agent. I remember I walked into his office one time. He was just screaming on the phone about something, and I couldn't believe it. I said, Julius, what are you doing? He says, that guy down there, he says, we were trying to get him to do Janis, and he wouldn't give me enough money. He says, those cheapskates, he called them all kinds of bad names. But anyway, when we were on the bus, we did this thing after the bus trip, we did this thing called the acid test, because we were trying to edit the movie ourselves, and it was getting impossible. And on Saturday nights when we'd show what we had edited, all people were pouring in from the Bay Area, and it just got too much for his house. So we started renting a hall to show the movies. And by then, the Merry Pranksters, a real band, we had switched over from trombones and flutes and those kind of things to electric guitars and electric bass and electric piano and drums. So we were an electric band. Our music, what I used to call a form of non-invasive pollution. And because everything, we didn't know any songs, we just make everything up and play along with it. So anyway, we started running these halls, and by then we had gotten to know these musicians. At first they had no name, and then they were Mother McCree's Jug Band, and then they were the Warlocks, and then while we were doing the acid test, they became Grateful Dead, but they were at every one. They loved it. And so we'd rent these halls, and we'd set up at one end with our stuff, and they'd set up the other end with their stuff. We'd show the movies, 3 projectors at a time on the walls. And Roy Seaburn, who invented the light show with a projector, he showed his projections. And so the evening would go on all night long. And it became quite a hit. And finally, when Kesey, he got busted for pot, and he was being sentenced to go to jail. And he faked his suicide and went to Mexico and split. But before he split, we were heading to LA with the acid test, and he told me to take over. So we were down there doing the acid tests, and this one night at midnight, LSD was becoming illegal in California. And up to that time, LSD was legal everywhere. So we decided to get out because that week on Dragnet, there had been a special episode on LSD. You can still see this on YouTube. It's a riot, where they're talking about this wild, crazy painted bus going down Sunset Boulevard with a sign on the side saying, "Can you pass the acid test?" And we were watching that, we were laughing. Oh God, we're really big time now. They're advertising us on Dragnet. Now the money will start pouring in. Yeah. So anyway, we split, all of us in the bus, and we went down to Mexico and hooked up with Kesey, and we spent 6 months in Manzanillo, Mexico, down on the beach. What would you call it? Woodshedding. Really a great time. We came back and Kesey mocked the FBI for a while, but then he let him catch him. He ended up doing 6 months at the San Mateo County Honor Camp in San Mateo County, which oddly enough, its property backed right up to Kesey's property in La Honda. And one day Kesey was out there in the brush, cutting brush on that hill, and he snuck off and he went up to the top of the hill where there was a spring to get a drink of water with his little blue cup out of the spring. Came back and he said later, if they'd caught me, that'd been the end of the honor camp. I'd be down in the jail in San Mateo for the rest of my time.
And one last question, which is, what was the impact of the bus trip, and how would you like to see it continue to impact the world today and into the future?
Well, the bus trip, as we left, LSD, when it hit all over the West Coast. And people like to think that we were somehow the lead characters in LSD, but we never were. We were just doing what a lot of people were doing, but what we did was unique, was painting that bus up and getting all the pranksters on and going to New York and back and filming the whole thing.
It's not about the drugs.
Yeah. What?
It's not about the LSD.
Well, LSD is always there. Yes. In fact, the movie would be, when it came out, it would be like a mock-up documentary with LSD being the one of the things, the catalyst of the movie. That's why it would be like no other, it'd be a major hit, right? Well, it became sort of a major hit that was happening in the 60s and the 90s. We were finally able to get it out in VHS cassettes. But anyway, what's the question again?
What was the impact of the bus trip, and how would you like to see it continue to impact the world today and in the future?
Well, the impact of the bus trip, like much of the pranksters, came about from Tom Wolfe's book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which is a fantastic book. He was at his gonzo best in that book writing. And he had a photographic memory. When he'd be around and hang around, he would get it all right. And in his gonzo way of doing it. That book was published in 1968, and it's still being published every year. Like at Eileen's class, I'd ask if anybody read it. There'd always be kids in the class that read it. Same as on the road. What was the point then? I can't remember.
How would you like to see
how the bus trip is?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is good because the original bus, when it got too decrepit to do anything more with, we towed it into the swamp, into the woods by the swamp in Kesey's place and left it there to rust in peace. But then Kesey, because we still had affairs to go to and everything, he bought another bus and we recreated the first bus. It became Further Again. People would ask him, which is the real bus? And he'd say, well, it's like the Starship Enterprise. He says, there is no original. They're all the same Enterprise. So it's Further, and now Zane, Kesey's son, he has Further and takes it out. And on the 50th anniversary of our original bus trip, he went across the country in the same route. But he did things we didn't do, which he would stop at small towns and places and find out in the woods they were having on Saturday nights their own acid tests. I don't know how many, 10 or 12 places they stopped, all doing it. They would have a band, a stage, and a Grateful Dead band would be playing, and they'd all be high and eating fire and doing all the things everybody did. You realize there's a whole underground sort of bunch of people in this country that are doing all these things that thank God the media doesn't know about. You know, like just like most of us. So thank God we were never in the spotlight. Because as Kesey once said, the spotlight also has crosshairs on it. So when that spotlight is on you, there could be somebody else with a weapon on you. I mean, he always gives John Lennon as the best example. But I don't think we have to worry about it being in the spotlight. We're too dumb. Go ahead.
How did you get involved with the Hells Angels? It seemed like kind of an alternate mentality to what you guys were doing.
We had a very good relationship with the Hells Angels. It started when Kesey was up in North Beach in San Francisco, and they were having a poetry night at one of the clubs there, and he heard this voice coming out in the amplifier, and he went in to listen, and it was the Hells Angels named Freewheeling Frank reading his poetry. And then afterwards, Kesey talked to him, and they got to talking, and Kesey says, "Why don't you come down to La Honda and visit?" And so Freewheeling Frank came down there one day with like 3 or 4 other Hells Angels. And so they hung around, talked, and drank beer and anything. And they agreed to have a party, an all-night party, sleepover at Kesey's house. And the whole chapter would come. And so they did. And so everybody was high up all night. And, we all got along real good, because with the Hells Angels, when they're not being pushed by the cops or other people egging them on or anything, because they'll lash out right away. They're regular good guys. So we were copacetic with one another. And then that led to, well, I'm not going to get into the other stuff we did together with them. It'd take too long. Go ahead.
And do you know anything about the train trip in Canada in the 60s?
The only thing I know about the train trip to Canada, through Canada, with all the bands, Grateful Dead and Janis Joplin and all that, is they made a movie of it.
Where's the movie?
I don't know where it is now, but I saw it once.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, it's amazing that it's not on YouTube. Yeah, oh, it's really good. Shots of Janis and them singing together, sitting on the coach and getting off in these little towns and they'd stop for a while. Really a great little movie.
Well, I think it's still out. I saw it, I don't know if this library has it, but the library I moved from Salt Lake had it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't remember what it's called though.
Festival Express, I believe.
What is it?
Festival Express, I believe.
Festival Express?
Something
Yeah.
to that nature.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you can probably get it
They
somewhere.
got kicked out about halfway through because they kept gotten warning. I think it was in Alberta. They had to shut it down
They shut the train down in
Yeah.
Canada?
before they made it Vancouver.
I thought they went all the way across country. I'm gonna sit down.
And you know John Melkay?
John L.K.
Melkay, he owns KKNX Radio.
owns what?
He's KKNX, the radio station here. He owns 4 radio stations.
Oh, here in town?
But he knew Joplin very well.
Oh, really?
And she never took a bath very often, he said. But he knew her. He did Monterey. He did the sound for Monterey Pop. But he's the owner of KKNX Radio.
Huh.
And they have a contest every 30 days of trivia. I won it 30 times. It's pretty easy because they grew up with the music. But
All right.
it's a good radio station. You don't hear the history. He talks about it. 5 or 6, 4, 5 minutes. About the history of the 60s. And he was there. And he was in Nam at the same time I was too. So we have a connection. You and I have a connection.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Because I was there in the 60s. And now that you know Joplin very, very well. So say he did Monterey, he worked at festivals. The Festival Express. That's what I'm looking for.
And we actually, I just checked, we do have a copy here at the library, but someone has it checked out right now. So, but you can place a hold on it if you like.
And it is called Festival.
It
It's on
is,
YouTube.
yes. It's called Festival Express.
It was pretty funny. They stopped halfway through, and in between stops, and would go make a beer run, alcohol run. They stopped the train.
Nice.
Can you look and see if they have the movie Ramfly here? Or no, not Ramfly, Barfly.
Barfly.
So Charles Bukowski has become one of writing heroes. The way he writes and the way he talks about writing and everything, it's very blunt and plain. But anyway, he wrote this great book called Hollywood, which was his affair with Hollywood. They were getting him to write a screenplay about this bar, and based on his experiences in this bar. And they did make the movie, and it's called Barfly.
We don't seem to have it, but we do have the script, the book.
Oh, Hollywood, yeah.
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 But we don't have the movie.
Okay, I'll have to get it somewhere. I'll get it online, I guess. I want to watch it now. I saw it when it first came out. O'Rourke playing the Barfly. Yeah.
Who played in that movie, Ken?
What? What? Who's
Mickey
that?
Rourke. Who played it? Yeah, Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke, yeah. What did you have over there?
This was a random question, but when the further bus was in San Francisco or around San Francisco, I heard that it was parked up near Perry Park and Fairfax camped out and stuff. Is that true, perhaps?
I don't know, was it?
I don't know.
When would this be?
I don't know. I didn't get it on our place, but some people, they said, oh, they used to park the further bus here when they came into town.
Oh, yeah, we'd go to San Francisco quite often in the bus for gigs or for some affair. And one time when Wavy Gravy was running for mayor of Berkeley. And I think this is the time you're talking about, when we parked the bus there at that park.
Okay.
And he was talking there. And we drove around Berkeley with him on top of the microphone, extolling his virtues to become mayor of Berkeley. Yeah.
So you have a very unique writing style. It's very fun to read. It's very stimulating for the mind. As I say, it's a trip. It's like a psychedelic journey. And so my question for you is, if you could say who are your top most writer influences, like when you're thinking back to how you developed your own writing style, who are your influences?
Well, I had all the great ones like Hemingway and Faulkner. And then the new one, Jack Kerouac with On the Road really was a big influence to change writing style, realizing you didn't have to map it all out ahead of time and, have outlines or anything like that, or even think about it. All you had to do was sit down and start writing and let the flow go. Ed McClanahan, our old pal, when he first met Ken Kesey, he said to him, he says, God, I really like that book Notion. He says, but what was that all about, that arm with the finger extended on the boat at the end? And Kesey says, I don't know. He says, that's what I wrote the book for, to find out. So that gives you a clue of one of the successes of writing is you don't know the ending when you're starting. You're working something out. And particularly with where the plot is involved and with complications, that you have to get worked out. You don't know ahead of time how you're going to do it. This book was easy for me because it was stories. Each story was only, I don't know how many, well, as long as you heard. Please read today, that's as long as the stories are. So I didn't have to, go along hard, laborious journey on the plot and the action and everything. Each story contained everything within itself. Yeah.
So you said there was some fiction. I saw the write-up about it. Now, how much of your book is fiction?
How much of this book is fiction?
Yes.
Well, there's no way of knowing. See, that's the beautiful thing about a burlesque. You're riding along and you're writing and, stuff happened and you remember it and, but wait a minute, what happened then? So you put in what happened then, You can't really call it, well, I guess you'd call it fiction, So, in fact, the phrase of the description of the book that Scott likes is creative nonfiction. Yeah, so there's no way of knowing.
I saw a 7-foot fish once.
What?
I saw a 7-foot fish once.
A sturgeon? Yeah, they're big. They're amazing.
Well, Eileen, when we cooperatively wrote the blurb inside the dust jacket, and she said, and he remembers it well, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. That's good.
That's the blab, the kind of.
Yeah, even if you don't buy the book, you should go up and read the description of the book on the inside left flap. It's really good. I worked on it, Eileen worked on it, Scott worked on it, Charlie Whitney. Yeah, so it's a collaborative affair.
So I'm also writing a book that mentions the Treason Mystery. And I'm just wondering, I had a supernatural experience there, and I'm just wondering if you guys had anything to that nature yourselves.
Supernatural experience?
Yeah, paranormal.
Well, yeah, what would you say, like every other day? I mean, that still goes on.
Something that
The other night, I'll tell you, yes, the other night I was out walking the dog. I take him for a walk so he can take a leak before we go to bed. And I walk along our creek, and the moon has just been spectacular these last few nights. And so I looked up, the moon was right overhead, and behind the moon were clouds. There were ribbons of clouds like this, going off into the distance. Between each one, a black thing, and within that black thing, action was happening. I couldn't quite make it out. I couldn't tell if they were animals or if they were electronic signals or people trying to get through to me or what. I was fascinated, but my neck got so sore, leaning up like that, I fell over backwards. So I figured, well, that's about as supernatural as I want to get tonight. Yeah.
How did you decide on 70 stories versus were there any that didn't make the cut?
Stories that didn't make the cut?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I'm bound to have some. I got a whole bunch of writings I've done. I could go through and do a whole bunch more stories, but I don't know. Once I started writing it, I think I included everything I was working on. I don't think I took any out.
I read that, but I think it's really good.
I couldn't hear that.
I like your book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's coming from my brother-in-law. I give him a lot of money.
No, that's true. I think it's great.
Oh, everybody likes it. I don't know if you watched it yesterday, but I did a Zoom with Bill Walton from Powell's Books. God, man, he was going crazy over the book. In fact, I don't know if you know Bill Walton, great basketball player, all-star, all NBA, Hall of Fame and all that, played at UCLA. So he's an announcer too for ESPN and Pac-12 and all that. So last week, Oregon was playing UCLA. I don't know if you like basketball games, but if you ever saw that, it was a tremendous game. We beat number 3 team in the country in overtime. So anyway, right at the beginning of the game, Walton comes in. He's got his partner there, Dave Pash. And he says, I just finished Ken Babbs' book. He says, God, it's tremendous. And he started going on about it. Dave Pash interrupted him and says, we don't care about that, Bill. He says, we're here to do a basketball game. Why are you reading that now anyway, before the game? And Bill says, he says, I was right at the end. I wanted to finish it. And he says, I always read something before I come in. It clears my mind so I can start clean. Everybody happy? Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. This is really good fun. The first live performance in, I don't know, a year or so. Terrific. I like that the best, real people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You'll be over here to sign?
I'll be over there signing books.
Hello.
Nice.
Is
I
that
found the print and there was bigger.